not be completely familiar with it, but my name is Gregory Strauss, and I work for Central Midlands Council of Governments. You all know what the COG is, Central Midlands COG? Okay. I'll just say, I like to say that the way I explain it is, we are the United Nations of local governments. We're there to make sure that we are addressing as a region all of those things that kind of go beyond individual political jurisdictions. So we do provide a lot of different services related to transportation, environmental planning, even aging services. But one of the most important things that we do is providing technical services to local governments. And so we've worked with the town of Batesburg-Leesville on planning and zoning issues for as long as I've been there, which is going on 14 years now. And I've always personally really enjoyed working with the town. But we are in the process of trying to expand the services that we offer. And one of the things that we feel like it would be very important to bring to assist local governments with is the strategic planning process. So we've done this for various organizations and entities and some of our other member governments, but it's always a learning process, and as you'll hear tonight, it's an adaptable and ever-changing process. And so I'm very much looking forward to learning from the wonderful staff we have here, as well as this partnership with the Municipal Association, and we're looking forward to working on this with you all. So what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to just really briefly provide a high-level overview of my view of what strategic planning is, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Shatner, which I think most of you know with the Municipal Association, to give us a little bit more detail, kind of get into the nuts and bolts, and talk about the organization and anatomy of a strategic plan. And Jeff brings, as you all know, incredible amount of experience both working within a local government as well as working with local governments across the state. So he's really going to be good at being able to tell us everything that we need to be thinking about as we move forward with this process. Then we're going to briefly talk about a discussion of the process and timeline associated with this, and that's what on your agenda we're actually going to ask you all to adopt tonight, is what we are proposing as far as how we're going to go from point A to point B to get you this strategic plan at the end of the day. And then we can just wrap up with any questions, comments, or if we have general discussion about the process that we'd like to make sure is on the table before we get started. So just to give you a brief definition of what it is, and I think this best way to explain it is that this is a process, an ongoing process of building consensus around a singular vision for what we as an organization, business, or in this case a community, want to be in the future, and then defining how we are going to achieve that vision. And so essentially we're going to accomplish this by defining a well thought out set of strategic priorities or goals that are then supported by more specific objectives and action strategies. And so for local governments, this process is viewed as a preventative and proactive measure designed to achieve efficiency and effectiveness in administration and delivery of the services that you all are charged with delivering. And there's numerous benefits to this process, but the single most important benefit is that it provides the town, both the council as well as administration, with a realistic and workable framework for achieving your goals. And it therefore becomes a valuable management tool that provides accountability, enhances efficiency and effectiveness in decision making on your end, and it helps to strengthen the capacity of the town as a whole to be able to accomplish what we all hope to accomplish to improve the community. And then most importantly, it's a participatory process. So it's not just participatory in the sense that we want you all to drive the process and to help us define what those goals and needs are, but it's also we also want the citizens to participate in the process as well, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And when we get that participation, it lets you all be more responsible and responsive to citizen needs, but it also narrows that communication gap between the residents in your community and the decisions and services that you all have to make. So this will build a foundation for continuous improvement, and it will give us the tools to monitor progress and give us accountability. And one of the last really important things that I want to mention and Jeff will talk a little bit more about this, is that a strategic plan is adaptable, and we have to be able to be willing to change it as environmental conditions change. So this is an ongoing, continuous process. And we're going to outline that process tonight, but just keep in mind throughout this whole discussion is that it's not going to end in June when we get through with this first piece of it, but it's going to continue to go on year after year. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff and let him get into the nuts and bolts a little bit, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. Good evening.
Now for the floor show.
Yeah. That's right. The opening act, right?
Yes.
Well, I think most of y'all know me, although I don't think we've met before, and I didn't get a chance to introduce myself to you before.
Chip's Bradley.
Chip, good to meet you. Yes, sir. I know everybody else on council, but my name's Jeff Shacker. I'm the Field Services Manager with the Municipal Association, and I'm one of two in that role. And basically my job with the association, and I think it's probably the best job, not only the Municipal Association, but probably a municipal government, is to provide technical assistance and communicate on issues with the 116 cities and towns that are located in the Midlands and Upstate. So basically, if you use the interstates to define the region, I've got everything west of 77 and north of I-20 in terms of cities and towns. And before they had the Field Services program, the Municipal Association was really dependent on the cities coming to us for assistance, or if they had a question about a service we provided, or what our legislative priorities were, or whatever the issue might have been, they had to reach out to us. And so in creating the Field Services program, what the association said is, okay, let's take the resources of MASC to the cities. And that's my job, and I share that with Bill Taylor, who has the lower part of the state. Both of us are former city managers or administrators. Bill was in Cheraw for about 33 years as their town administrator and had some stops along the way before he got there. I spent 12 years with the city of Newberry and had a few different jobs, but left there as city manager, and I was the city manager about 4 years. So that's a little bit about me, the Municipal Association, and the Field Services program. What we're talking about tonight basically is the kickoff for a strategic planning process that's being recommended to y'all, and what I would say is probably the highest and best use of your time as a council member, because I think just about everybody around the table has something else that they do 5 days a week, at least 40 hours a week. You may probably spend more time than that at your job. You've got families. Hopefully you've got a little social life, and you've got things you like to do with your time other than this. So you're limited in what you can dedicate to your job as a city council member. So what I would submit to you is the best use of your time is looking down the road, especially in this form of government, council manager form, is looking down the road and identifying the direction that you want your community to head in and your organization. Because I think what you'll find is if you're not working within that airspace, if you want to think about it like an airplane in that airspace, you're going to have folks that are making these decisions for you, and generally they're going to be making those decisions out of personal interest. And that's why I think it's really important to bring the community in that you do this. I thought I would just share with you some reasons why you would want to consider doing strategic planning, and then also talk with you about what I think are highly effective city councils. And I don't know if any of you have read the book Good to Great. I love that book, and it's they've got a social sector addition to it that can be applied to nonprofit and government. I really enjoyed the corporate one though, where they had corporate examples, companies that and CEOs that you never heard of, they identified as the top level CEOs in corporate America. But some of the principles are here in this description of highly effective councils. But a highly effective council, number one, thinks about plans for the future. They don't leave the future of their organization or the community to chance. They generally are really good at establishing a vision, and they stay on message. You know, we're hearing a lot about the need to stay on message in the election season, because we got a couple of candidates that, by and large, are kind of straying from that at times. So they stay on message. They establish a vision and well-defined strategic priorities. They define results. You know, if you've got a plan that talks about, well, we want Batesburg-Leesville to have the best quality of life in the state of South Carolina, and that's it, that plan's going on the shelf. It's probably going to have that much dust on it after a couple of years, and you're not going to have accomplished anything. So they're very, very clearly define the results they want to achieve. And I think this is really significant with your form of government. They empower the employees of the city to achieve those results for them. So they very much understand that this form of government is modeled after corporate America, where you've got a board of directors, you've got a CEO that the board appoints, and that CEO has personnel resources at his or her disposal to get the job done. So that in a nutshell is kind of what an effective council does. They also understand that it's really important that the council takes some leadership in maintaining relationships with leaders in the community and residents, and that they do it in a way that they instill confidence, the public's confidence in them. You know, for instance, sometimes council members may have personality conflicts. Best off handling those behind closed doors, because you don't want to do anything that discredits you as a leader. And if you're airing dirty laundry, particularly if it's not related to a policy issue and it's a personality conflict, I know y'all do a good job of controlling those things. Some of the cities in my territory do not. I'm going to visit one of them tomorrow, actually. All that does is the media latches onto it, members of the public begin questioning, are these folks even effective leaders, and it just snowballs on them. So that's really important. And they're just committed to protecting the city's future and provide the leadership to ensure that the actions that you're taking month to month at your council meetings are going to produce a desired future. And the only way to do that is to have a plan. So the challenge that I think a lot of elected officials confront when they're newly elected to council is trying to determine, do I do what the people want? The individuals that come to you, maybe attend your council meeting, maybe see you in the grocery store, maybe knock on your door and come visit you at home. Do I do what they want, or do I make good, sound decisions that serve the best interest of the city? And there's some tension there. Because what you're dealing with are two simultaneous realities. What people want generally is the here and now. They want instant gratification. They want some result that is their number one issue. And a lot of times as an elected official, you've got to make them think that that number one issue to them is your number one issue. I mean, they want you to listen to them and think that it's important. So you're balancing the here and now with the future. But then you also got a question when they come to you, how do you really know what the people want? And I'll use an example, not a specific example, but I'll draw back on my former life, a city of 10,000 people. If 10 people show up to a council meeting, and the council was no different than any other municipal elected official in the state and probably nation, it was like the sky was falling. Oh, we got 10 people that want something. Well, there's 10,000 people that live in the city. And maybe what those 10 people want is representative of what the public wants. But how do you really know that? And that's where a plan comes into play. You've got a public participation element, so you get feedback from the public, but then also you recognize the fact that this is a representative democracy. We've been elected, these 9 people sitting around the table with the advice of a manager in this form of government, to try to make decisions about what will serve the public's best interest and the best interest of this organization. So you've got 2 things there. Planning process will get you valuable public input, but then also it reinforces the fact that we need to take the bull by the horns and we need to develop a plan for this organization and city. So another issue, and I kind of think about it in terms of living from paycheck to paycheck. When you get out of college and get married and your income's probably at the lowest, hopefully, that it's going to be in your married life, you kind of live month to month. And when you're living month to month, it's hard to pick up your head, look at the horizon, and figure out where it is you want to go. And so I think newly elected council members find that out pretty quickly. But then I think also councils that get stuck in a rut where they don't have a plan can never pull themselves out of that, because they just go from month to month. And ensuring that your decision making is going to achieve some greater result because it builds and it's consistent is a whole lot more difficult than when you have a plan and you can refer to that plan and you have a citizen or a group of citizens come to you, or the staff makes a recommendation to you, or whatever it is, or one council member does. They recommend something. If you have a plan, you've got a litmus test. Does this plan conform with the priorities that council has identified, the goals in the plan, or is it inconsistent? And if it's inconsistent, the decision has to be made. Do we amend the plan to add this, or are we simply going to back up the punt on that one issue, and we're going to stick to our game plan? So that's why plans are so important. Like Gregory mentioned, basically a strategic plan is a roadmap. It's designed to get you from point A to point B. Point A is where you're at now. Point B is where you want to go. And it's twofold. It's the outside world, it's the community and your community objectives, and probably, I would venture to say, when we get into goal setting with y'all, there's going to be a lot more about the community than there is the organization. Not that you're not going to have goals there, but so you've got the internal and external. Generally, councils focus a lot on the external, because those are really visible and things that are beneficial to the community. Like Gregory mentioned, a plan is a living document. If it's not living, it's not going to work for you. And you're going to need to make a commitment to monitor it, and you're going to need to make a commitment to update it regularly. And it's something that needs to be referred to council at every meeting and by staff really on a daily basis. And one thing, I get a lot of questions about this too. How does a strategic plan fit into comprehensive plans, downtown master plans, those kinds of documents? The strategic plan is the overarching document that you follow. The comprehensive plan, a component of that is just simply compliance with state law, but then there's really good information and objectives in there. A downtown master plan may very well be a goal that's in your strategic plan, that, hey, we need to do some planning with our downtown area. The master plan would address that in really specific ways. So I look at those documents as being subordinate to what is being proposed to y'all that be developed. Why do strategic planning? I think y'all have probably had this experience, and you definitely have with 9 council members. The more council members you have, the more differences of opinion and unique perspectives you're adding into the equation. But each council member is going to have a different agenda. And what the strategic plan does is it serves as a compass. Because really you hash out a lot of these issues and identify what your shared goals and priorities are during the strategic planning process. Once you've got it adopted, then it's time to follow the plan and implement it. And then your job is going to be to allocate the resources necessary, the manpower necessary, and identify the partners necessary to get it done. And I think it's really good too, the strategic plan re-emphasizes the separation of powers. You kind of remember that from like 11th or 12th grade when you have government and economics, and usually they pointed federal examples. You've got Congress, the legislative branch, and you've got the president who has the executive branch. Well, in the council manager form of government, you got separation of powers. You got the legislative branch, the council who's over policy, and then you've got a statutorily required manager that the council appoints and employs. That's the executive branch. And I think the strategic plan does a great job of focusing council on the policy, on the priorities, and focuses the staff on achieving those things for you and making those things happen. So everybody kind of stays, if you think about the highway example, like we were talking about California, you're in California and you're on a 6-lane interstate, accidents start happening when people start changing lanes, it gets everybody in their lane and keeps them in their lane. So I think the strategic plan accomplishes a lot of sort of additional benefits. I thought I'd mention some of the elements of a strategic plan, and the terminology can vary because there's no one right way to do this. There's so many different ways to do it. But basically, if you think about it in terms of a hierarchy, your highest level is going to be your vision. And you can make it a wordy vision statement, or you can make it focus areas. And focus areas are fine, and I'll give you an example. I think Rock Hills is quality services, quality places, and there's a third one, and it's not coming to me. But that's an example of the use of focus areas instead of a couple of sentences that would describe what your vision of the community is. Either one of those approaches is fine. So that's your highest level. The goals are going to be statements of what that you want to accomplish. And I'll show you an example of these to illustrate it. The objectives would be how you go or how you intend to go about accomplishing your goals. So the objectives are going to nest within the goals. So kind of think about this as something that's almost like a pyramid. Tasks, and this is the really important element. This is where the rubber meets the road. These are going to be specific projects, activities, actions, relationships that you plan to work on. The things that are going to be necessary to achieve council's goals and objectives. And then you've got to have an accountability component, and that's where the benchmarks come in. The benchmarks are going to exist for every single task, and they're going to identify the performance targets, and they're going to make it quantifiable. So if it's that, hey, you know, we really need to address our city streets. We need to resurface those streets. A benchmark may be in FY 17-18, we're gonna resurface 5 city-maintained streets. Now you know at the end of the year, were we successful or not successful? Yeah, outcomes. That would be a great way to describe it. Yeah, the other component of the benchmark too is the accountability component. Who's gonna do it and when's it due by? And each one of those items needs to have it. Or you have a document, again, that you're gonna run the risk of sitting on the shelf and collecting a bunch of dust. I mean, this is a very specific work plan that's gonna be underneath these layers of vision, goal, objectives. Okay. So a simplified planning process, and again, this is a major simplification of what Gregory is gonna show you in terms of the true recommended schedule or outline for this, is number one, and that's part of why you're here tonight, is to agree on the process and approve by council action. And why that's so important is because if you don't have agreement on the process, you don't have a plan. So council's gonna need to agree that, yes, we think this is a reasonable approach to developing the strategic plan. We understand that maybe not 100% of what we want as individual council members is gonna make it into that plan, because council's gonna decide that by a body, but we think the process is fair, we can live with it. And council should accomplish that at a future meeting with a motion and vote. The next step is going to be identifying the goals, and I mentioned sort of what the goals are. And again, operating within two spheres here: the external, you know, the community, and then the internal, which is going to be this organization. Because again, y'all are like a board of directors. You've got a community mission, but then you've got an organization that you're responsible for ensuring is being run right and efficiently, and based on your goals. So that's the internal component. So an example of that. And I'll just use, I picked public works because most cities have public works, so this is a good way, I think, to demonstrate it. So a goal might be provide, improve, and maintain quality streets, sidewalks, and stormwater systems. Well, you can see, if you stop there, you haven't really accomplished anything. But this is a reasonable goal. An objective within that would be, okay, let's talk about sidewalks. We need to evaluate our sidewalks, and we need to address concerns based on need and funding availability. So we're going to look at, okay, basically we're going to do an assessment of our sidewalks. Which are the ones that are in the worst condition that we need to address? And then also we might want to tweak that strategy based on funding availability. And it might be some area in town that qualifies for a CDBG. You might be able to tackle a sidewalk project as a component of a water and sewer upgrade, where you're going to be cutting into sidewalks. You're going to have to make some strategic decisions outside of a pure physical condition assessment. So that's an example of an objective. One thing you're probably going to want to do too is when Gregory shows you the schedule, we'll get into a meeting if y'all agree to this. And you're going to be, as council members, individual council members, you're going to be throwing tons of ideas out there. And we're going to be furiously scribbling these things on flip charts that have sticky on the back. And then we're going to stick them all around the room, if you don't mind. It shouldn't take the paint off. And so you might have, 20, 30, however many sheets around the room, and you're going to have a bunch of items on there. More than likely, the items you identify are going to be in the task and objective category, because it's probably going to be easier for y'all as part-time elected officials to kind of think in terms of more specifics and less on generalities. And I think that actually is a really good use of your time, as opposed to you sitting there trying to come up with a vision statement. I think this will be really beneficial. So what will have to happen is going back to the public works and the sidewalks, is there's going to be a need to reverse engineer the vision. And I think doing that, we can save you all the time of spending your precious time doing the vision, when we can simply articulate that, bring it back to you, and make sure you're comfortable with it. So then we've got you all focused on more specific areas that you want to see addressed by staff in the plan. The next task is going to be, and again, this is a real simplified way of presenting it, it's going to be to develop the work plan, and that's going to be the task element. And again, y'all are probably in this work session going to identify some tasks, but then you're going to have some objectives and goals too. And so it's going to be the job of the staff and of the consulting team to figure out, okay, well, what is this? Is this a goal? Is this an objective? Is it a task? And then we're going to have to figure out, okay, well, if it's a task and it doesn't fit underneath an objective and goal that y'all have identified, we're going to want to try to create that, kind of similar to that vision reverse engineering, and present it to you and make sure you're comfortable with it. Yes, that's an accurate reflection of what we're looking for and what we said during the work session. So that the work plan is going to be the task element, and benchmarks are going to play into that. Like Mayor mentioned with output, I mean, we're going to have to figure out, okay, well, how do we quantify these things? And how do we figure out or recommend to y'all who's responsible for it and when it's done, can be done by realistically. And then adding timeframes and responsible parties. So an example of that, going back to the sidewalk example, is a task might be, okay, well, the first thing we need to do is understand what the condition of sidewalks are in the city. So we're going to conduct a sidewalk inventory and we're going to assess their condition. The benchmark is, or the accountability component is, the Public Works Department's going to do it, and they're going to do it by the end of this current fiscal year, because we can't progress with sidewalk improvements until we know what we got. So that would be an example of coming up with a task and a benchmark. And if council, and again, there's going to be some examples where y'all come up with something really specific like this, but I would venture to say there's probably going to be a good bit of this, objectives. And so meetings with the department heads are going to enable us to identify recommended tasks for y'all to consider that help address these goals and objectives that y'all have already identified. And again, that comes back to council. And there's going to be some give and take, because probably the staff is going to identify some objectives too. And it's going to have to come back to y'all, make sure you're comfortable with it, and then we integrate it into the plan. So, and y'all may come back and review these levels and may come up with some additional tasks that you think, hey, this is a way we think we can address our goals and objectives, and then that would be included in the document as well. So it'll be a little bit of a back and forth. Another example, and this is, thank you, and this is work kind of showing you the tree or the pyramid. We're still in public works, we're still talking about sidewalks, but in this particular case, we've got our assessment done, and now we want to start improving sidewalks. So we want to increase funding for sidewalk repair and replacement. We want to increase it by $20,000 a year. City Council is responsible for that. So y'all are going to have to make that happen in the budget. Of course, Ted would include it in his draft budget to you. And that's something we want to begin doing in fiscal year 17-18, because we did the condition assessment in FY 16-17. So now we're ready to move forward. Here's an example of going outside of the sidewalk tree, but staying within public works. Now we're going to get into streets. We want to improve the condition of city-maintained streets based on priorities identified in an inventory and assessment. So that inventory and assessment's already happened with the streets. So we know where our streets are and what condition they're in. We want to appropriate $50,000 from our reserve fund, because there's supplemental money at Lexington County Transportation Committee. We want to strike while the iron's hot, and they require a match, just hypothetically, using that as an example. So we're going to strike while the iron's hot. We're going to pull $50,000 out of the bank, and we're going to go after that funding. The metric is we want to resurface 5 city-maintained streets. I mentioned that earlier as an example. Public Works is responsible. Got to get it done by the end of FY 18. Okay, so now this is an example where we're completely moving out of that focus area. So now we're out of services and we're into high-quality places. Part of your role as council and in municipal government is placemaking. We do that a lot of times in our downtowns. So we want to develop and maintain high quality places. We want to redevelop our and y'all have 2 of them, downtown commercial districts. Physically, yes, makes it even more challenging. You got 3? Oh yeah, okay. So you got a lot on your plate when it comes to downtown commercial revitalization. So we're talking physically, economically, and socially, the major components of the downtown. In this particular case, we're talking about physical improvement. So we want to physically improve the downtown to create an environment that's attractive to people that are willing to invest their money, visitors that will visit our community, and residents that hopefully will shop there as well. One of the key components with the physical environment is the private building, the privately owned buildings, because you got the public space, you got the private domain. So we want to implement a facade grant program. We want to improve 10 buildings. We want to get that done by the end of fiscal year 17-18, and we're going to have planning and development department coordinate that project for us. So that's that's an example. So that's basically kind of what trying to show you some examples to explain, well, what is the difference between a goal and objective? Sometimes I can't keep it straight. So when we've done that, it comes back to you, it's finalized in a written plan. Of course, there are several steps in that. That plan is going to address procedures for monitoring and reporting progress, and I would submit to y'all, I think a really good frequency for that is I think you should update annually, because as conditions change, you need to update your plan, because some things that were realistic are no longer realistic, and some items that you didn't think could be done maybe could be done, because A, B has happened, and now we could accomplish C. So update the plan annually, and I think a really good way to monitor progress is to do it quarterly, at quarterly work sessions of council. Now, the purpose of the work sessions would be multifold. It would be to get an update on the plan, but there are also going to be items that come up that you're probably going to want to discuss, and it's just not conducive to discuss them at a business meeting. And I think work sessions is a great environment to do that. So I would just recommend that to y'all, but again, there's no one right way to do it. And then ultimately, you're going to want to adopt the plan by council action, and I saw Gregory included that in the schedule there that he's going to show you. Doing it by ordinance, which I think is perfectly fine. You can adopt it by resolution or by ordinance. I think ordinance is great, though. And I was just going to mention to you, I know you're already kind of headed down this road, but I think it's really important to have somebody come in from the outside and facilitate this for you. And I can speak from experience of doing it a different way, where in the city I was in, we didn't have somebody come in from the outside and facilitate it. And I tried to do that and tried to track all the balls that were in the air with council discussions, and you got 7, or y'all are 9, but I had 7 bosses, and you can be direct with them, but you don't want to be too direct when you work for them. And so just keeping them, herding cats and keeping them on task, it's really helpful to have somebody come in from the outside and do that. And I think it really frees the management staff that are present in those meetings to sit back and listen to you, understand where you're coming from, each council member. Maybe if there are opportunities for them to participate in that component, they can participate. I think it's just a really good way to do it. I think the keys are that you've got somebody that understands small group processes. They got to be task oriented and keep everybody, because 3 hours will be gone like that. So you got to keep it moving. They need to be non-directive. You don't want them to be the 10th council member. It's 9 of you. They need to be committed to full discussion to keep things moving, and also full participation of all council members. And that's one important thing, I think, because usually there's at least 1 or 2 council members on just about every council. Maybe y'all are the exception to the rule, but just doesn't feel like they get heard, or that their opinions maybe don't matter as much as the others. And I think having somebody that ensures that everybody gets equal opportunity, uninterrupted opportunity to express themselves is really important. And I just want to throw out some parting thoughts here. Number one, the process matters. It's very important. That's why this step is so significant, and it's pretty much the entire meeting this evening, is because if you don't have agreement on the process, you don't have a plan. So this is extremely important. It needs to be simple. It doesn't need to have a lot of big words. It doesn't need to have a lot of words, period. It needs to be as simple as possible, or you're probably not going to use it as much as you could. It needs to be as short as possible. It needs to be clear, particularly with tasks and the assignment and time frames for each one and the metrics. If you can't measure it, how do you determine if you're successful or not? So if you can quantify something, quantify it. It's got to be monitored. We talked a little bit about monitoring already. Referring, I think, is extremely important. So when you're having work sessions, council meetings, budget meetings, I think you want to have that plan handy. And I've done some, not quite as elaborate as these processes, but I've done some with some other cities where the 3-hour meeting with council to identify goals was the extent. And then we prioritized, and the administrator or the clerk or whoever wrote it up into a document. I suggested to them, I would put those up around council chambers. So you can refer to them during council meetings, and I've been to a bunch of those cities, and those flip chart sheets are up on the wall. They neaten them up. It was a lot better than my handwriting. But they have them prioritized, and they got them up in the council chambers. So when an issue comes up, the council just turns their head to the right, and they look at it and determine, okay, well, is this consistent or not? Another great thing to do, too, is on the agenda, when you've got an item before council, is this item, if the council so chooses to adopt this ordinance, addresses the following goal area in our strategic plan. Even if it's not one of the items listed in the plan, you can demonstrate consistency and share that with council before the meeting by writing it that way in the agenda and in the memorandum of council summarizing the agenda. So I think that's really important. Revisiting, I mentioned that. And I would just say too that a lot of people think, well, you hire the high-priced consultant that does a lot of strategic planning and you bring them in and that's the key to success. But really, it's just about commitment. If you're committed to it, then you can be successful with it. So those were kind of my thoughts on strategic planning, and I know I ran through that, but I appreciate y'all's time.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
I know I asked this question earlier, but I just want to revisit it. At what point do you keep a plan realistic versus unrealistic? And what's too much? I mean, you could obviously have a plan that is just loaded with so much information, but you could also have a plan that's so simple instead of short. You know, is all that determined through the goal setting session and trying to figure out what is achievable and what's not? You know, we don't have a plan right now. And so as we're creating, we really don't know what's achievable and what's not achievable. So how do we really steer ourselves to knowing that we have something that is achievable? Or is it going to take some time? We really have to start, and that's what the annual evaluation will determine.
Well, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, it's got to be realistic. And I think, realistic is, I think there's like a quality and a quantity component. So I guess what I'm thinking by, and quality is not the best word for it, but if it's just something that is just pie in the sky that just cannot be achieved here, or, I mean, it might be something that you can't achieve in those communities in South Carolina, you got to really question putting that in your plan. You want to have items in there that you can actually get done. The other thing is, on the quantity standpoint, is if you look at it as a work plan, I mean, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're just including a bunch of items because you think it looks good on paper. I mean, you've got to try to scale the plan down so that the number of items are something that it might not be possible to achieve it in 1 year, but you can achieve most of it in a year. Because, I think a key with it is that you stretch the staff. So, I mean, you don't want to set the bar too low. And it may be like you said, you may just have to go through this initial process, and then, that first update may be kind of a reality check that, hey, this was just a little too much. Or the opposite, you might figure out, okay, well, we're capable of accomplishing more than we thought.
Well, I have a question as far as your involvement and Gregory's involvement. Is it just tonight? Then you guys are done? Or as we develop, we come up with the ideas, are y'all involved to help us roll that out? Or is it, like I said, is this just a one-time shot, or?
That's probably a good time to go into the process, because we'll explain the process and timeline a little bit. If there's no other questions specifically related to the stuff that Jeff presented.
I have one. Okay. 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, how long should the plan be? And before you really come back to the table and do a full evaluation.
Did we just say annually?
Well, annual updates, but
So it's a living document.
I've seen 3-year plans that people have. I've seen 5, and I've seen as much as 10-year strategic plans. What's the difference?
I mean, you can really, again, there's no right or wrong way to do it. I think what I would do is just kind of, it's almost like, I was going to use the spaghetti analogy in the wall. I mean, you're throwing these ideas up, they're going to get prioritized by council. Some of them are going to be, hey, we can't accomplish this until 3 years down the road. I think to a certain degree that can define what your horizon is. And then as you do the updates, you may weed through items, okay, well, we can throw this out because we can't achieve it, or we've already taken care, we've already addressed that, let's check it off. And then those updates, I think, are going to have a similar effect. This item can't be achieved for another 2 years, or maybe depending on grant cycles or whatever it may be. So I think I would just let the plan develop, dictate the time frame.
That's going to be.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the time frame probably is more applicable to like the vision. You know, I mean, you hear these people, okay, well, you know, this is gonna be Batesburg-Leesville 2030, or something like that. But I think what we're kind of pitching is that it's being more driven at the grassroots level, more focused on the objectives and tasks. And we're kind of reverse engineering the vision, so that just would be my recommendation, you know. I don't think I'd be worried about that.
Are you thinking short-term goals and objectives versus long-term goals and objectives?
Well, I've looked at,
5-year, 10-year, 15-year plans?
well, I've probably looked at 50+ strategic plans, just getting on, looking at other cities, large, small, medium-sized, and somebody has a number attached to it, a 3-year strategic plan, a 5-year strategic plan, 10 years. I've seen a variation of timeframes on those plans, and really, what's the difference? I mean, what's long-term, what's short-term, what's medium?
Funding.
I'm just trying to understand what their reasoning for 3 year, or their reasoning for 5 year.
I think some of that will get flushed out too as we go through this first part of this, because if we end up realizing that a lot of the priorities that we're hearing from everybody, and there's consensus around them, and they're big ticket things that can't be done in 3 to 5 years, that might dictate the length of the plan. So I mean, as a general rule, I'd kind of think, you know, a 5-year time frame, but I think there could be things in there that could go beyond that, just depending on what we see as realistic and implementable strategies.
And I think, you know, each individual item, you know, we talked about the metric element to it, who's responsible for it, and the deadline. I mean, I think each individual element in the plan is gonna have a deadline associated with it, or horizon on it. And if that's not accurate, when you do the annual updates, you're gonna update that date, you know.
I think it's gonna be important that we have some long-term vision plugged
Yeah.
into this,
Yeah.
so that everything is not just an immediate fix, boop, 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 and every year we're revisiting the document. I think there needs to be some forward thinking in the process to begin to lay the groundwork and the framework to get us from point A to point G.
Well, I think that it includes the transition in our council makeup, you know, that it's for those coming on new, that they've got some goals.
There is a
that they
roadmap
see.
in place.
Yeah, and a direction to go.
And I think a lot of them are gonna be, like using the public works example, the goal and objective is probably gonna stay for the next 20, 30 years. It's gonna be those individual tasks underneath those addressing
And
sidewalk
what it takes
projects.
to meet that goal.
Those things are gonna be updated more frequently.
Thank you. Okay. All right, well, let's go through this process. We've kind of devised this around the framework or anatomy that Jeff explained. But I guess I'll kind of start first with roles and responsibilities, and to answer your question. Our team, I guess we're calling the project management team, Jeff and I, and Teddy and Seth, you know, we'll be involved in working together throughout the process of this whole thing. My role will be really the kind of the glue that holds everything together. I'll probably be doing a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of drafting and coordinating the meetings and making sure that this process we're about to go through goes smoothly. Jeff, we're going to really rely on his expertise to help with the facilitation piece with us, and to provide us with insight as we go to make sure that we are doing things in a good way and consistent with how other communities have done it and what seems to work best. So the process that we are proposing is designed to get us through this by June. So we want to have a finished product ready for you to seriously consider adopting by the end of May in 2017. So with that in mind, we'll start with August here. This is what y'all should have this in front of you. This is where we are right now, is this project initiation or kickoff meeting where we're introducing you to concepts and defining the process. And this will follow over the next month with some background work and research that we will be doing to just kind of pull some of that initial existing conditions and information together. You know, where are we? That's asking the question, you know, where are we now? And that will lead up to, towards the end of the month, this first council work session where we're going to be doing this goal setting, the strategic priority setting. And that's where we'll do what Jeff was describing and get the input from you guys, have you tell us what your priorities are, and put those up on the wall, and try to get as much information and input from y'all as we possibly can. Then it comes back to us, more behind the scene works, doing the analysis and summary of the results of that work session. And then we want to bring that back to you and make sure that we accurately capture and describe what we were hearing during the meeting. And from that point is where we start taking it to the department heads, trying to take the goals and the priorities and objectives that you all are telling us and starting to develop some action strategy recommendations to put with that. And again, like Jeff said, we may be getting some of that from you. So our job is going to be to kind of make sure that all of that fits and we can organize it in a good manner. In November and December, this is where the public input and stakeholder input comes in as a part of that participatory process. We're proposing to hold a public information session where we can actually allow an option or opportunity for the public to tell us what their needs and concerns are. And then we're gonna, a big piece of this is scheduling some focus group meetings and as a part of that or separately some follow-up interviews with particular stakeholders within the community. And so typically we'll organize them, hold a series of these kind of based on themes. So if one of them may target the business community, and we'll try to develop a list of stakeholders from the business community and bring them in and do kind of a SWOT analysis where we'll ask them how do you see the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to the community, and get their input on all of this. Coming out of that, we'll have to summarize those results, and then the trick is taking what we've heard from you all, what we've heard from the public, and what we've heard from the stakeholders and focus groups, and bringing that all together and trying to synthesize it with the council, the priorities from council that we originally heard. And then we're in a really good position to start refining that into some detailed action strategies and benchmarks and all of the things that Jeff mentioned. Throughout this process, as you'll see in bold, we'll be bringing summaries back to you to tell you where we're at, making sure that we're on schedule. And by March, we'll start finalizing everything, go back to meet with the department heads, and start developing any more details that we still need to bring together. And then the last piece is developing some policies and procedures for that monitoring and maintenance process that Jeff talked about, and putting all that into a draft report so that we can present that draft to you in April, incorporate any feedback that you have for us, and put it into a final draft for presentation to council in May for the first reading, and then the second reading in June. So it's an ambitious time frame, but I think we can definitely do this, and as everything Jeff said, it's very, very important. I think we'll get a good product that staff can then take back and utilize moving forward. So that's our process. And now I guess before we ask for action, if there's any other questions or discussion.
And listening to you talk, I was thinking about some of the goals, the objectives that we have now, that as this develops over the next 10 months, there may be some of the things that we throw out there, number one, that may be accomplished before June, but may change in what was first originally proposed as well. So as we're throwing these ideas out there, they are things that we are currently working on as well.
I think so, yeah. I think we want to know, and some of that will come out, I think, in that leading up to that first work session where we're working with Ted to identify what some of those things are. But I think it's entirely possible that even if we're close to accomplishing something that's a priority right now, it could lead into follow-up measures that would be an important part of this process.
So the process is going to require us to meet monthly?
Yeah, no, I don't, we've got, I think, the work session in September, that's the big one. And then the idea, and we can structure this anyway, but in October, we just wanted to make sure before we went too far down the road that we were presenting back to you what we heard and make sure that it's consistent. So that's why we put in there as another work session in October. And from that point on, I think it's going to be just updating you with our progress at regular council meetings.
So I think we go from October until February, that we're really doing a lot of work. Now, at council meetings, we can talk about the updates through November and December when we're meeting with the community and getting stakeholder feedback and focus groups and stuff. We can bring that back and just do a quick report on we're making progress in this area through the normal council meeting. But kind of the full report, I think it looks like September, October, February, and then April, May, and June, and we're kind of getting into the first and second readings of the final plan at that point.
So the public information sessions can be incorporated in the regular council meeting as a public hearing session?
They totally said.
No, that's when they will meet directly with the public, correct? The public information sessions?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where they're soliciting input from
Right.
specific portions of the input with business people and.
Are we just worried about how many times we're meeting or what?
Well, we want to know how many times we're going to have to meet, so
Say whatever it takes.
whatever.
I don't think this is something that we can talk too much about.
Yeah, I agree with you that we don't have an opportunity among ourselves to discuss a lot of things that need to be discussed. So any opportunity that we have to meet and
I wish we did this once a month. That's just my opinion.
A good plan.
a very doable
Down with that,
plan.
whatever it takes to get it moving forward. Run that with that. Could be. Anybody have questions? More questions?
Okay. It's a good start, something we need to
Yeah.
on.
Mr. Kane, you want to join us to vote on this as an action matter?
Are we voting?
We're just gonna vote to accept, basically, what's gonna be the process of strategic planning, what they've presented as the process, we had said that, and then this timeline, just as our guiding timeline, that this is gonna be the process and the timeline, and so we're all on the same page, that this is what we expect.
I didn't know we were going to vote.
It was on the agenda.
It was in the email.
Do I hear a motion by council to approve the strategic planning process as presented?
I second.
Motion by Chip, second by Rachel. Any further discussion? District 1,
District one votes yes.
District 2,
Yes.
District 3 gonna vote?
How about no?
Vote no. Okay, District 4?
District 4 votes yes.
District 5, District 6.
Yes.
And I vote yes. Thank you. Looks like we just adopted your planning process. This is a significant investment for town. Like I said, it gives us a roadmap to the ability to move the town forward in an organized fashion instead of in a reactive manner. Yes, sir.
And I'd like to add, now that the process has been voted on, Mr. Sprouse is gonna finalize the actual contract for Central Midlands to perform this for us, and should be next council meeting. meeting to present it to you guys. If you remember, we allocated.
As in Monday night, 12, whatever the
2
thing,
weeks from
2
now.
weeks from Monday night.
So now that we have the process, he can iron that out specifically in the contract, and we'll present that at that council meeting to be voted on.
Well, I think it's really good, like Jeff said, that to have an outside facilitator, somebody that's kind of helping us go through this without us trying to struggle on our own.
Well, they're
It's
neutral territory too, so,
Okay.
their expertise would be very wanted and welcome in this process. Anything further?
Move we adjourn.
Got a motion, is there a second? Second for Todd, we are adjourned.
Back there, there's dessert over there.